through your experience, what percentage do you feel of outdoor recreational climbers are able to properly judge their own safety while leading above gear?
I have no idea about an actual number or percentage, but I would say probably not as many are actually as competent as they might think they are.
What about like the same percentage, same question about people able to actually handle like a rescue scenario, whether that be self-rescue or aiding in a rescue of somebody else?
That one, I think people probably are more in tune with the fact that they wouldn't know what to do in a real scenario, in a real rescue scenario. Um, I think largely people know that, but they're still not very overly focused on the rescue skills a lot of the time. Um, yeah, a little bit of stress goes a really long way. And if things actually go sideways, it can get kind of ugly pretty quick. So you just want to have all those skills that you might need or use to be just like totally second nature. And they're perishable skills that we don't practice very often. So, unless you're like really taking the time to focus on that stuff regularly and train, then it's just not going to be second nature. So I think people largely know that. Um, and accidents largely don't happen. So it kind of works out.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say half the battle is just not getting yourself into a situation where you need to use those skills in the first place, right?
I mean, prevention, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a huge part of that.
So kind of like circling back on that kind of, that original question of like being able to judge your own safety. We have this internal question when we climb of needing to answer that question at any given moment, whether you're above gear, like, did I place the gear correctly? Did I do it right? Will it hold a fall? And I think it's kind of this hard question to really answer until you actually fall on the piece of protection, right? So like for someone getting into this sport, for someone that's dealing with gear fear, for someone that's trying to push themselves, how can we better as climbers trust our own judgment?
Yeah, I think you have to get the data. And I think the overarching principle, like as an educator and a teacher, a mentor for me, is that, working a progression is the answer to anything, right? Exposure therapy, like that's a term that's kind of in vogue right now, but just working through things and gradually getting more used to the way things work, getting the data on how good your gear actually is, getting the data on taking falls from small falls to bigger falls, just so you have like actual real world experience so you can make a sound judgment in what you're seeing and feeling in the field. Um, a lot of the stuff just goes by our gut, and our gut may or may not be accurate at any given time.
Would you say that aid climbing is a good source for building that relationship with gear?
That's a great place to start. Yeah, I mean, body weight testing placements is a great place to start. It's not going to be quite the same as holding a real fall, obviously, but it's a good place to start. It's a good place to start with like the gear setting in the right orientation and actually starting to bite in the rock, whether it's a nut or a cam or tri-cam or whatever it is. Right. Like if you're actually on a pitch that you're wondering about how the fall is and you're wondering about how the gear is, hopefully it's a pitch where you have some ability to back that gear up closely down below that piece or nest some smaller pieces together. But I mean, even on the pitch that you're concerned about, if you start by body weighting a placement, even with just a sling, like you said, aid style, and then weighting it like with the actual rope being in top rope form, I mean, that's doubling the load compared to aid placements, right? The whole idea of like the pulley effect of a top rope, where if the climber weighs 100 pounds and the belayer's holding 100 pounds, that the piece holds 200 then. So even a static placement hanging on it with a top rope is twice as much as just hanging on it with a piece of sling or cordelette, right? And then you can just do progressively bigger falls on that piece to see what it does, like see how it acts, see if it moves, see how the rock quality is, and then see where you land and where you're actually put in space if you were to fall, right? So I think just really just easing into it is the way to go. And the more like the overarching principle is, for me at least, is that if I have a lot of uncertainty, I'm going to ease in more carefully. I'm going to be more conservative approaching that. And the more I have figured out, and the less ambiguity, uncertainty is there, I can commit more to diving in with both feet, right? So I think the gut is really important for us to recognize and follow and listen to, because it is there for a reason. And if things are largely new to us and we don't really know what's going to happen, um, then our gut's going to tell us that. Hopefully, um,
Well,
yeah,
there's kind of the struggle there though, right? Because if you don't have enough data, your gut doesn't really have the data to make the right decision. And I think a lot of people will get scared in that kind of situation. And then you get to the question of like, okay, well, am I, is this real based fear, or is this just like fear that I'm kind of experiencing that is not necessary?
well,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think understanding how much experience you have in that setting with the variables at play is a really important place to start. Yeah, and
Being
if you're,
being honest with yourself about your lack of knowledge or kind of where you are, at that moment.
yeah, totally, and the pieces that you do have figured out too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, knowing what your strengths and knowledge is compared to your weaknesses and lack of knowledge in any situation is really valuable. So, yeah.
You had mentioned the difference between flow state, being in control, and then I thought there might be a third one. It's out of control climbing. And this kind of like leads into this kind of topic of mitigating risk. Like, how do you see the difference between those three? And do you feel like there's ever a place for out of control climbing?
um, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that largely, whether we know it or not, a lot of us have stayed with climbing because we enjoy being in flow state, um, which, the clinical definition, if you've the book Flow, or the research by the man's whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce because it's really challenging. Um, but the book Flow, and this man's research is really valuable in that it tells us that flow state's accomplished by um, feeling like you're very capable at performing this very hard task. So basically, your ability to perform the task is pretty high, and the task is still challenging. And so, from flow, if you mess with either one of those variables, either it's too hard for you or too easy, or you're not feeling as competent at it, or feeling overconfident at it, then that'll change where you are in that like kind of matrix little graph thing. And so I think we all are just like moving back and forth from flow state into more of a control state, or more of a what's called like an aroused state, all the time, right? And so what feels great, I think, is flow state, when it's all just kind of happening. Like you're just in the moment, you're trying hard, it's working, you're doing the thing, you're not having to think about it. It's just happening. It's great, etc. Right. And then most of the time, the best learning happens when you're just past that phase. Like you're just like a little bit outside your threshold. Like you're really having to like think and engage and actively think through all the things that are going on. That's where we generally learn the most, in that stretch zone. But that's probably not the safest place to be in terms of like understanding and being able to manage variables that could cause you harm, like in climbing, right? So when you're in a more controlled state, you just have more access to more bandwidth to focus on seeing a little bit more of the picture, I think. Um, and so for instance, for me guiding, that's where I live a lot of the time, right? Like I kind of know how it's going to go largely before we get into it. Of course, there's always variables that can change that, but for the most part, I don't. I'm not looking to be in flow state or beyond, which maybe is like kind of that out of control phase you mentioned
Mhm.
when I'm guiding, for sure,
Yeah, for
because
sure. Yeah.
that's exactly not my job, right? Um, like my clients are having experience and adventure, but I should not be probably, uh, yeah, or at least most of the time. So I think it's just a balance of rolling the dice and being outside what you're really comfortable and capable of, right? And competent in. And the that's the magic, is like finding that edge that's hopefully sustainable over the long term, of pushing and engaging and having a great time and having these like peak experiences, with also not obviously getting hurt or having something bad happen. So um
What about the climber that might be wired in a way where overcoming the fear is a sense of pride, and therefore kind of putting themselves in these more dangerous, risky situations that kind of warrant the fear reaction. To me, it's unsustainable. Have you met anybody like that, and what advice would you give them?
I mean, I think we all have different risk tolerances, and we're all just comfortable taking different amounts of risk. So if that's someone's thing, like, I mean, game on, like hats off to them, like, it's really not my place. I don't feel like to tell anyone how much risk to take. Um, I look at my job as being, um, hopefully a voice that helps you understand the risks you are taking. So if I can help educate someone in like, hey, like this sort of setup or doing this sort of thing is really probably more dangerous than you think, or the consequences of this scenario are high because of these reasons, or if you learn these skills, you'll just be generally safer. Uh, I try to help people understand the risks they're actually taking, and usually that's through knowledge, right, and experience. Um, just being able to see more nuance, to be able to see more um, of the details and difference in different scenarios, um, and then they can take that information and assume as much risk as they're willing to take, I guess. Um, and I mean, to be honest, like I feel a little bit split sometimes. I was talking about this with my colleague last night, where it's like my entire career revolves around basically saying, "Hey, we should be doing this as safely as possible." Yet I'm also in the field 200 days a year doing a really dangerous thing. So like, like my exposure overall is higher than a lot of people's. So my general philosophy is like I do it as safe as I can. But the law of big numbers is against me, right? The longer
Mhm.
I do this, the more days, and this is true for all of us, the longer I do it, the more days out in the field I have. If it's a very small percent chance of something going wrong, it's more likely to happen the longer you do it, right? Um, so there's that piece. And then there's also the piece of sometimes it's fun to take risks. Like, let's be honest, right? Like, let's just call an ace and say that it's kind of fun doing dangerous things well. So,
Yeah.
like I like driving my dirt bike fast. I like snowmobiling in remote places. I like going on trips that are really far from the road. Um, that sort of stuff, right? So like that adventure and risk taking, I think is built into all of us that do these things. And it's just being really honest with ourselves and trying to understand the risks that we're taking that I think is the most important part.
Okay, on this topic of kind of risk, there's this progressive nature of danger in the different disciplines of climbing. I would say, bouldering, sport climbing, trad climbing, alpine, high altitude climbing, each kind of discipline starts to accept more and more risk. Do you feel like throughout these disciplines, risk is ever fully mitigatable, manageable, or are there areas in the world of climbing where we are rolling the dice?
Oh yeah, I think we all roll the dice all the time. I think luck plays a huge part in it. I think luck plays a bigger part than any of us want to admit in all those scenarios. And I don't know that the risk. I mean, there's lots of ways to think about risk. And and I mean, for example, like I don't boulder a lot because, well, partly because I haven't bouldered a lot, so I am more worried about the ground fall potential and like every fall being a ground fall. So so if I'm not as good at bouldering, it's going to be more dangerous, right? And if I'm not as good at placing trad gear, it's going to be more dangerous. If I'm not as good at reading ice quality and understanding weather patterns and how the ice formed, ice climbing is going to be more dangerous. I mean, so in my mind, like it's the risk part is really interesting because it's super subjective to your skill sets and your knowledge. And so absolutely like through like going through that progression, you're adding on more variables that are at play. And so yes, I think inherently like risk is going up as you went through that kind of list. And alpine climbing is probably, really high up there, especially with alpine skiing as well, where you're just balancing a bunch of variables all the time, and so many of them are out of your control, and so many are just unknowable. Um, and so, um, you have to be really skilled, and you have to spend a lot of time in that terrain looking at all those variables to even start to begin to do those things safely, right? But a big part of the risk analysis is subjective, I guess is my point. And that there are big objective risks, but the subjective part is, well, where are you located and when relative to those big risks, like Serac fall, right? And if you're missing the cues of a warm up, for example, or solar radiation or whatever it is over time with the conditions and weather part of it, then of course it's going to be more dangerous because you're just not skilled enough to understand how those things interact. So I think probably there are more variables as you go through that list at play. You have to understand them better to even have a chance. And just by virtue of all those things adding up, you have to be luckier.
How do you feel like one could curate luck?
Oh, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like I have some friends that say, well, better lucky than good. And some friends that say, well, better good than lucky. And I want to be both really good and really lucky. So I don't know how to curate luck except for being as well-rounded and skilled as I possibly can and trying to figure out the variables and risks at play as well as I can before I get into that terrain, right? The planning, the preparation piece, the training piece, all those things. And not just for a season or a year, but like over decades of, your overall training and evolution as a climber or skier, play into that as well. I mean, having great mentors is probably the single biggest thing you can do to safely navigate a progression of any kind, but especially getting in situations where there's lots of variables at play like that.
Yeah, I've heard that luck favors the prepared.
Totally. I was going to try to quote that, but I was like, I can't quite remember how that goes. So I misquote that one all the time. But,
yeah. I mean, essentially it makes sense. You put yourself in a position where, you allow luck to happen to you, right? Rather than, kind of doing everything wrong and then almost attracting those kind of poor outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, the things we don't know can still kill us. Right?
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. One thing that I'm curious as to your thoughts on this. So in the past and kind of, I would say currently, if I'm being honest, I feel like there's a little bit of randomness when it comes to trad gear and trad falls. Like I feel like there's almost no real way to know whether or not the piece is going to hold you in a fall unless you actually fall on it. Is that a real thing, or is that a symptom of poor gear knowledge?
I mean, you can never know with 100% certainty about anything and how it's going to act. But I do think like thinking about the level of confidence you have around something is pretty useful. And that goes back to that kind of based on experience piece for sure. It's kind of like, well, what percent chance of that going bad or not working do you have in your brain, right? And so I play some pieces and I'm like, that thing's absolutely truck. There's no way it could ever come out of that placement. And some I have less certainty with. Yeah, I mean, with cams specifically, or with nuts for that matter too, oftentimes just placing the piece and giving it a quick like yank test, like a jerk test on the piece with the draw, if you're wondering about how it's going to kind of sit in the crack, can do a lot to like start the placement moving, if it's going to, into the place it'll actually start holding. And that initial, especially with cams, that initial biting of the lobes and the rock, like the transference from the force going out against, from out where you're pulling to out against the crack, will give you a pretty good indication that if that starts holding like that, it's probably going to keep holding, at least to a certain point.
It's like almost like setting a nut. You're essentially testing what's going to happen on a small scale.
Yeah, you're testing the surface friction. Yep, and that relies on angle as well as the actual coefficient of friction in the crack. Yep.
And then on this, I know you're a big proponent of nesting gear, and that's something I really am a proponent as well. And it's funny, I don't know if you've seen, but I run like a POV channel. I post a bunch of climbing videos. It's all about trad. And it's funny, like anytime I'll double up on gear, someone's like, well, why did you place that second one? And like my answer is always like, why not? It's like, and it kind of leads into kind of where I want to take this, but there's almost like this pressure to take on more risk, bring less gear, thin your rack down as much as you can, place less, run out more. It's almost like this pressure that I felt when I was getting into climbing, and in my social circles and throughout this podcast, the people I meet, it's this common thread that I continue to see people, whether it's, a pressure they put on themselves, or maybe it's a pressure from social media, or maybe it's a pressure from external factors, but there is a general thread of this pressure to, I would say, assume more risk in a way when it comes to climbing. Where do you think that pressure comes from, and does it have a place in climbing?
Interesting. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think largely all of us in climbing are, we have healthy egos, right? I mean, it's nice to feel like you're a badass. It's nice to feel good at something. And I don't know, like it does sometimes come out in a way that's unhealthy or even toxic. And I just don't think it's a competition at all. I don't think there's any room for any of that stuff at all. Like that conversation doesn't exist for me in my world of climbing. Maybe it did for a little while early on, but I don't even listen to those voices at all at this point. I mean, I do remember reading very early on in my climbing career, 20 plus years ago, like Mark Twight talking about climbing these great big routes in Alaska with, the super light rack. And then I went and did some routes in Alaska, and I'm like, wow, like I think I just want the gear I want to climb the pitch relatively safely, and I'm going to be faster because I'll be climbing more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
If I feel safer, I'll be climbing more quickly. So yeah, I'm going to carry a little bit more, but so I don't know. It's a super personal thing. Everyone has to figure that out for themselves, and you just want to feel good about what you're up to, right? Like you just want to feel confident and capable, and like you're having fun, and maybe pushing yourself a little bit mentally and or physically, but you don't want to be feeling scared or less than or any of that sort of thing.
I definitely don't agree with the scared climbing. Like I do not like climbing scared. Like why would I want to climb scared?
No, I don't think that's why anyone would start climbing. which I mean,
yeah.
I think we've all been scared, obviously, but I think part of the satisfaction comes from doing things that maybe you used to be scared doing that now are not scary, right?
And I think that's the catch, right? It's like, it's back to that fear thing of like overcoming fear, overcoming being scared, like overcoming those situations where you were scared, and then triumphing and having that kind of satisfaction after the fact. But I don't know. I feel like there's more satisfaction in executing something just flawlessly, right? Like climbing, even if it's not an on-site, climbing through a pitch, every gear, you're like, I was so confident on all that gear, and I moved through it all, and I got to the chains, and sure, I'm like tired and I pushed myself, but I was never scared. I was in control. I was locked in. Like to me, that's such a bigger source of pride than like just being gripped out of my freaking mind and then like somehow making it to the chains. Like honestly, I'd be kind of like ashamed of myself at that point. It's like, what went wrong there?
I was going to say, I think there's actually a lot of shame in people being scared climbing. And I think that, I mean, we all have insecurities, obviously, but yeah, like there's just no place for shaming other people.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not shaming other people, but shaming myself in terms of putting myself in a situation where I was scared, because to me, scared means out of control, means that I'm in a risky situation where like I don't like the outcome of what would happen if I fell.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, shaming ourselves is a whole topic. We could probably spend a lot of time talking about that. But I mean, I think being kind to ourselves goes a long way, I guess.
No, for sure. I'm definitely not advocating shaming yourself. What about this phrase, if you're not falling, you're not trying? Do you Like, what's your take on it, especially when it comes to gear climbing? Obviously, ice climbing is a different topic. I'd say it's mostly about gear. And would you say this is advice that most climbers should be following?
Ooh. Um, I That's a good question. I mean, I guess I wouldn't phrase it quite like that. I would say it's really important to know when it's okay to fall and when it's not okay to fall. And part of that is just based on your experience falling, um, experience falling in that way, in that orientation, in that kind of distance, in that terrain, on that sort of gear. Um, so I think it's again very subjective, but I think we all need to try to figure out um, when it's okay to fall, when it's not okay to fall. For us personally, in the moment, I think that that's the key to really being able to climb your best and your hardest. Because I mean, we have to admit that falling can be part of climbing, and doing it appropriately is kind of the art of the game. I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think, again, it's all just like a personal thing of how much experience do you have? How well do you think you can judge the situation? And then back to that same thing of nesting, right? It's like, if you're looking at a crux move and you're not really sure what's going to happen, maybe put two or three pieces in to just ensure that, however you do come off the wall, the outcome is going to be pretty safe.
Sure. I mean, for you, what are the variables that you think you have a handle on with trad gear? Like, is it certain rock types? Is it certain um, rock configurations? Is it certain pieces? Like, what are the if you look at the variables that are all at play there, which ones do you think you have figured out, and which ones do you think are more question marks at times?
Well, I'd say that given my history with my accident, it really shook my understanding of placements altogether because I broke the eyelet of a wire on a nut.
Mhm.
The head of the nut was still in the wall and the eyelet broke.
Yep.
And so I really, to me, I didn't even think that was possible. And so like it kind of questioned everything up to this point.
Mm.
But I mean, at
How
this,
how big of a nut?
it was a DMM peanut, 5 kilonewtons offset.
Yep. So
Um,
so pretty small.
smaller, but I mean, I'd say 5 kilonewtons is still relatively strong for lead falls. It's like right at the edge, right? Anything smaller is pretty much an aid piece. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, our audience have heard a lot about this accident, so I want to, go into it too much. There's a lot of factors that went into it. Not a lot of rope out, new belayer, took the slack out of the system. Basically all the things that could have gone wrong to increase the forces in the system happened, and so that's what happened. But I would say now, I it's hard to say. I don't really ever know. I'd say I'm confident enough to climb at the level that I am, and I feel like I can place trad gear well. I'd say, I have a lot more experience on the sandstone medium than I do others, but I've done my fair share of granite climbing. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know if I can actually answer that question in terms of like how actually confident I am in my placements. It's more of just like, I guess I know when I'm more confident in my ability to know when I'm going to come off or on the wall, and being able to like mitigate that risk with extra gear and hope that, one of them holds in a way.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a great topic, and these topics are always hard for me to like a little bit hard to just speak like hypothetically,
Mm-hmm.
or theoretically, and so I mean, what I've been realizing more and more for myself is that a piece that's rated for 8 kN or greater, I feel a lot better about. Like that piece to me feels like, okay, like now we're talking about it being strong enough. And I'm not talking about the interface of the piece and the rock, but the actual piece in general being strong enough that I feel good about it. And so I've been trying to figure out like why that is exactly, of course. And I think a few things go into it, right? So I will preface this, I am not an engineer. I am not a physicist. I'm like an applied science guy who's just got like a bunch of mileage doing stuff and thinking about it, but like I have no real authority in this realm whatsoever. Um, but I've talked to a lot of very smart people. And so when I think about forces in climbing, I mean, we kind of think about like this, like carabine is rated for 20 kN by the UIAA, right? Slings are rated for 22 kN. Um, The rope test is designed with a single rope to be less than 12 kilonewtons on an 80 kilogram load steel barrel as the climber, right? With a fall factor 1.8 over a very small edge, 5 millimeter edge, which is basically a carabiner size edge. So a 1.8 fall factor, 80 kilogram barrel, and it can exert more than 12 kN on the barrel, right? That's the UIAA. That's the UIA rating for a single rope, I believe. And so they drop it once, and if it's more than 12 kN on that person, it doesn't meet the rating. It's got to be less than 12 kN, right? So say it's 10 kN max, right? If it's doubling at the pulley effect of the piece, that gives you your 20 kN. So I don't think it's a coincidence that draws, dog bones, the sling's rated for 22 kN, the carabine's rated for 20 kN, right? So that to me is like, I consider that to be like a full strength, a structural full strength kind of climbing rated thing. And so when I build anchors, for example, I'm building them to be more than 20 kN by the ratings on the pieces, right? And each piece we have has a rating, like you mentioned. And so what that means is, okay, like if the piece is actually breaking at that KN rating, and this is all just like my mental math that I've been again spewing out and kind of thinking about, mulling over. If I'm trying to build a system, and we are creating safety systems, right? It's never just one thing. So we're always creating a linkage or a system overall to create this anchor and system that supports 20 kN in my mind. And so if I'm trying to create a 20 kN anchor out of pieces that are rated by how they break, I'm going to overbuild it a little bit. So I'm going to shoot for like 25 to 30 kN in my anchor based on the pieces and the materials. So if I have, say, 3 pieces that are rated for 8 or more kN, well, I have my 24 plus kN of my anchor, right? The biggest pieces on my rack aren't really rated for more than like 12 kN. So, 2 big pieces, yeah, that might be reasonable if they're secure enough in the rock so that we have strength and also the security, right? By contrast, if we have a ice screw anchor of 2 10 kN ice screws, which are 13 centimeters or longer, we have a 20 kN anchor, but they're also really secure in how they could be compromised, right? You pull on that thing any direction, they're not going to move. They're not going to pull out of the ice. So I've got a 20 kN anchor with 2 ice screws that's also very secure. Not very often is it the case that I put 2 cams in that are 20 kN or more and very secure and getting pulled multiple directions.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to make an anchor that's both really strong and very secure. So my number in my head is like 25-ish kN by the ratings of the pieces. So that means 3 middle-sized pieces, 8 kN or better. And if they're smaller than that, say they are 5 kN pieces, 6 kN pieces, I'm probably using 4 of them to build my anchor. Right. So I think that's kind of how we get to this idea of usually trad anchors are 3 pieces. If they're small, they're 4. Right. They're not usually 2 because they could be compromised by moving. So then if I think about lead climbing, and hopefully this is helpful, if it's not, just stop me.
No, I love it. Let's go.
If I think about lead climbing, I'm like, okay, well, how much force do I really create as a lead climber taking a fall? Because that UIAA test is kind of extreme, right? It's an 80 kilogram load, not moving at all, and is a 1.8 fall factor, which is pretty high. So, okay, so let's look at like real world lead falls. In talking to some friends that are engineers, if I think about like 4 to 6 kN being like a pretty significant lead fall, I think we're probably, well, what I think I know, what I believe to be true, which again is not based on actual hard data, is that above 6 kN is probably pretty hard to create on my body in a lead fall scenario. And above that, I'm probably going to break stuff anyway, like my hips, right? Like our body starts breaking above much more than 6 kN. So if I think about like 4 to 6 kN being a pretty sizable leader fall, and I factor in that pulley effect at the piece of gear, because I'm multiplying it by 2 in the pulley effect at the piece, if it's 4 to 6 kN on my body, the belayer feels the same, I'm doubling at the piece, I kind of want like 8 to 12 kN piece, right? And so for me, that's something I've been kind of coming back to recently is I kind of want 8 kN at the high point. And so if I don't have pieces that are that big, I might be nesting. I might be doubling up in order to get 8 kN. So not just like very quickly in succession, but rather like combining them some way so that they're getting pulled on at the same time, right? So they're sharing the load. So yeah, I mean, when I think about putting and this is like zero judgment at all about anything. This happened with your accident, but when I think about a 5 kN piece, I'm like, whoa, like that starts to give me a little bit of a red flag, in that piece, I could overpower that piece and break it. And all of this, of course, is to say that rating that's on the piece is just the piece breaking. We don't know exactly how it's going to break. It's just the manufacturer saying that it's going to, like, that's the max it's going to hold. And of course, the interface of the piece in the rock or the piece in the ice or whatever it is probably oftentimes a limiting factor.
Or the type of carabiner that's clipped through the eye loop. Like how much surface area the carabiner has.
Yeah, but carabiners are rated for 20 kN.
Well, no, but like if the carabiner itself is really thin, then it's going to exert more pressure on a smaller amount of area on the eyelet.
Yep, for sure. That's fair for sure. You know, and then we talk about things like the carabiners being opened, like the gate being pushed against the rock, something like that. So I mean, that's kind of like some of the things I think about a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I like the mathematical side of it in terms of thinking of kilonewtons. It's like, let's, you know, the anchor, I think 20 newtons for an anchor, that's a really cool point. And then when it comes to nesting, you know, have you heard anecdotally of any, like what actually happens during a fall when you have like a piece that kind of holds and then pops and then you have the one right below it? Like, is it lowering the amount of force on each sequential piece, or is it the same or more?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have a lot of actual data, but what I do know has happened, not uncommonly, and what I worry about with placing small or marginal pieces, like I basically don't place marginal gear. If I think it's marginal, I take it back out and I save it for later, and just like admit to myself that it's not a good piece. You know, so the risk, and part of that is the risk of putting a marginal piece in as your high point, is that it may be good enough to elongate the rope. And then if it elongates the rope and fails, what happens to the rope underneath that piece on the belayer side is it will go into like a spiral, like a slinky style, right? Like the rope will just like oftentimes go into like this like whipping kind of spiraling pattern. And it's not uncommon for that rope to get unclipped from the next piece, which could be a great piece, right? So, yeah, I mean, just very anecdotally, I talked to a friend here last year in the Gunks who was climbing nearby, not in the Gunks, but nearby, and took repeated falls on this one piece that was pretty decent, went a little higher and put a piece that wasn't as good in to shorten the fall, and that exact thing happened. And it actually went even worse than that, where it was like basically the good high piece that was being tested before got unclipped. The rope came tight on the next piece, which was not that great, I don't think, and pulled that piece. I don't know the exact details, but like essentially the person almost hit the ground because of a combination of unclipping and then pieces pulling from, you know, the forces being higher at this point because the fall is bigger with pieces down lower that weren't as good. So yeah, I mean, weird things happen.
I know that's the thing. It's like really hard to account for like freak accidents like that, or it's like, you know, it's hard to make that judgment call.
But I think, you know, I think that we need to just keep in mind that we are creating a safety system, right? Like I was just thinking about this today. It's so common for people that I've seen clip one bolt in a 2-bolt anchor, either rappelling multiple stations or going up and just clipping one bolt and not clipping the bolts together. And I don't quite get it. Like to me, there's zero disadvantage with putting a small, like a, you know, pre-tied quad, for example, is one of my favorites, on 2 bolts and clipping the master point or focal point, whatever you want to call it, and weighting both those pieces. Now you have strength and security, and you have 2 anchor points. And I get that one bolt is obviously very strong most of the time, but it's also they're mechanical bolts. Like you don't know who put that bolt in. I've seen bolts pull out. I pulled out bolts with my fingers. So to rely on one piece with the tolerances that are so small for it to potentially go bad, when there's such an easy way to add that much more security, kind of blows my mind. And people will say, well, I hang on bolts all the time. Like I take lead falls on bolts all the time. It's like, yes, but you're using several bolts in a row usually.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just,
It's not the
you're
single
weighting the
point
high
of
piece.
attachment. Yeah.
You're weighting the high piece, of course. But you have a whole system of protection, hopefully, on the pitch. So
when it comes to this topic of risk and kind of everything that we've talked about, do you feel like there are any essential items or habits that, we could pick up, this audience, this community could pick up and bring with them to make kind of everybody around them safer? Like a essential piece of kit or a habit or a mentality. I send professional recording equipment to every single guest to ensure top tier video and audio quality. And those costs add up. Right now, this podcast is also ad-free, and I would love to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help cover shipping costs and keep this podcast ad-free, please consider joining our Patreon. With as little as $3 a month, you can help support the show. You can find the link in the description below or go to patreon.com/the Climbing Majority Podcast. That's patreon.com/the Climbing Majority Podcast.
maybe the biggest and simplest thing to do is just to talk about it afterwards with your partner. Like, hey, how'd the day go for you? Where do you think you were most at risk today? Where do you think I was most at risk today? Anything you saw that you want to mention that maybe I didn't notice? Right? Like just a couple simple questions, over a snack or a beer post climb could be super useful and is probably where we all can learn the most, to be honest. We learn a lot in the moment in the field, but until we actually coalesce that in our heads and think about it from a more objective stance, from someone else's perspective too, hopefully, we're just not getting the full picture, right? Like we have our experience, of course, but we're just losing on so much perspective to not get a partner's feedback.
I've experienced this firsthand over the last 10 years filming my own climbs, and I feel like you've expressed the same. I feel like there's a wealth of information in filming your own climbs and watching it after the fact.
Totally.
You like get to see things that you missed, or you get to judge your placements. And I mean, there's times where I'm like, oof, that wasn't as good as I thought it was, and it's really cool feedback. So if anybody's, I feel like that's one piece of advice you could do if you're looking for trad climbing advice. Like film yourself and then honestly get your feedback, get somebody else's feedback. Be like, was this good? Like be honest with yourself. And you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah. I mean, I do a ton of guide training. I'm in the middle of a guide training course right now. And, we formalize this a little bit more with the debriefing, but we also ask like, okay, like where were you most at risk today? And where were your clients most at risk? And that's an easy question to answer when something big happened, of course, but it's much harder to answer when it's very routine. And I think that's where the gold is. Like just in a routine day that went pretty well, like, okay, like let's just keep tweaking, right? Like how can we improve? How can we get the same result or a better result with taking less risk?
Yeah. When it comes to people kind of searching for advice, trying to learn, obviously mentorship is, I think, the best route. And I think that's something that you stand by pretty strongly. What advice do you have for people finding and seeking mentors?
Keep trying. Don't give up. Like if you see someone that you want to be a mentor, mentee of, or want to mentor you, just go ask them. I've got nothing to lose. If you have something you can bring to the table to offer them, that'd be really great, right? I mean, I've had a bunch of younger mentees here in the Gunks, for example, that can gain a lot from me. I think, just like overall perspective wise, some have been guides, so like the business side of things, skills in that regard, but they climbed harder than I did. So it's a really nice like symbiotic relationship. If you've got a rope gun, but I can help them, navigate some of the things that they might not have quite figured out as much yet.
I would say that's kind of a rarer situation. I would imagine that most of the people seeking mentorship are probably beginner climbers, and I think that's the hard part, right? It's
Maybe.
you're trying to find a mentor, and that I mean, I would say, depending on who you are, to be a mentor for somebody else is, I think, something that you also say is extremely important for the community, and I totally agree. But it is asking, I think, a lot from somebody in a way. You're depending on how different your skill levels are. You're asking them to take you out. I think there's a lot of it's a lot to ask. So yeah, it can be hard sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's room for everyone to be a mentor and a mentee at the same time through their whole career. And, it might be subtle things. There may not be a huge split in ability between the two people you're partnered with, right? But every partner you have has strengths that you may not have, or, have expertise in one area. And every partner you have has things that you can help them with. So I think if you're looking for it and understand kind of how it works, I think that it can happen much more naturally than a lot of people think. Doesn't have to be like this one like guru that's showing you the way. It can be lots of little things.
It's like a communal sharing of skills. And I think the big thing that happens is when the disparity is too large between the skill sets, then it's more one giving to the other than kind of this symbiotic trade of knowledge in a way.
Yeah. And I mean, like I'm a full-time climbing guide and I view a lot of my days out as being a mentor largely. And they're giving me money and I'm giving them my opinion and expertise and
Yeah.
guidance, whether I'm actually leading the rope team or I'm teaching them how to lead themselves, or any other combination.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. So kind of like, switching this topic towards kind of the guiding aspect of it. I'm interested in the AMGA association. I'm interested in the culture of guiding in America. I want to kind of dive into this kind of topic. So what would you say the current state of the guiding industry is in the US in comparison to that of Europe?
I think largely in the US it's growing, and I don't know exactly in Europe as much, but I think like the state of the guiding industry overall.
It just seems like this might be totally misplaced, but it seems like almost like a fringe career. Like there's not a lot of glory, unfortunately. I'd say it's stereotypically not very financially compensating, especially for somebody in the beginning stages of it. A big barrier price wise to get into it. You really have to be super passionate about what you're doing in order to make it successful. And it seems like the guiding industry in Europe is a bit more glorified. It's governmental supported. There's a culture behind it. I think guides are a bit more revered. There's a lot more traffic in terms of clients and income. I guess I'm curious as to like, is that true? Is there like a difference in the culture between the two countries? And do you feel like, you said we're growing, do you feel like we're kind of headed in that direction?
I think everything you said is true. I mean, it's very much professionalized in a lot of the European countries. And that's largely just the culture in general, I think. So, I mean, people waiting tables there make a living wage, and guides make a living wage. It's often seasonal for guides there, but yeah, it's like every worker there in a lot of the European countries that I've traveled in, Switzerland and France, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert, are making a better living wage than whether you're in a blue collar job or not. You can make a living wage there, and you're required to be licensed as a guide in France and Switzerland, in Italy, and that's just not true in the U.S. Right? I mean, like, whether waiting tables here, you're getting a pretty nominal wage and you're relying on tips a lot. A lot of blue collar jobs don't pay a living wage. So I think it's just generally like a cultural problem as much as anything else. And guiding is a blue collar job that, depending on where you work and how skilled you are and the work you want to do, you can make a living doing it. It's not going to be, a really extravagant lifestyle, but it is possible. But it's going to take a ton of effort, and it's going to probably mean traveling at least part of the year. And it's going to mean working a lot, and it's dangerous. So, I don't know where the industry is exactly going, except that more people want to go climbing, which is, it's getting more and more popular all the time. So I do think that's good for guides in general. Um, and many areas don't require guide certification and training, but I think it's largely very helpful for guides to go through that training, both from a risk management perspective and a client experience perspective, but also just from a sustainability perspective, like trying to make this work financially is super helpful to be more highly trained.
Yeah. You had mentioned in a previous podcast that there are boxes that we have created in this culture around when and why we should hire a guide. What are those boxes?
That's good. That's a good question. I don't remember saying that exactly, but I do think that largely we view it as like only beginners hire guides. And in contrast, like you're saying, in Europe, that's not the case. Like if you go in the mountains in Europe, you just hire a guide. That's just what you do, unless you're a very skilled and full-time climber in your own right. If you're going to go backcountry skiing, hiring guides is just absolute routine. Like you're literally paying a professional to help mitigate and manage the risk for you, and know where the good snow is, for example, right? And I think in the US, it's much more of a just a do-it-yourself mentality. Like a lot of people do their own plumbing and wire their own houses, right? So there's some pride in doing it ourselves. So I think it's just, again, part of the culture overall. But I do think that, as there are more guides and more highly skilled guides that have a variety of offerings, that there's huge benefit to a lot of different climbers at different stages of their career to hire guides and gain a lot of knowledge and experience and just become more well-rounded. I think, for a lot of climbers, like once they reach a certain level of expertise technically, it's just a way to say like, cool, like I've got enough of those skills. Now I want to go push the grade, right? Like I've got the skills I need to go do the things I want. So it's good. Like it's good enough. And whether that's conscious or not, I don't know exactly, but I think there's a lot of room to grow for all of us as climbers. And I think that the minute we stop trying to develop and become more well-rounded, we should be really careful. It breeds complacency.
What would you say the typical client that you see hiring a guide is?
I mean, I don't know, but I think at this point, I don't know what it is for lots of different guides, but for me at this point, my clientele is super varied. I have people that are, families that bring kids that are just starting out or just trying to have a good weekend. I have people that are learning to lead. I have people that are pushing the grade from 5.9. They want to go into 5.10, 5.11 on lead. I have folks that are rock climbers that want to go alpine climbing. I have, very experienced climbers that climb 10 days a year that just want to keep climbing and following big routes, whether it's rock routes, alpine routes, or ice routes. And I do a bunch of guide training as well for the IFMGA. So my
Super
clientele,
varied.
it's really very varied. Yep, for sure. Which makes it really fun. I feel like trying to figure out how to have a really amazing experience for that person on that day is the art of the whole thing. Like where I go with somebody and what we focus on and how we orchestrate the day is the most fun part of all, right? Like all the technical skills, all the interpersonal skills, the experience is really just a means to an end to be able to take someone and be like, okay, we're going to do this today because this is going to be perfect for you right now.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like there's a marketing issue with US guiding and like not reaching the audience and having people understand what the benefits are and what the experience is like? Because at least on like a social media and even the internet, I'd say most of the representation for guides is like anchor building videos and like tech tips and stuff, which I think are extremely valuable, but it almost doesn't even do the experience any justice of like what you would have as a guide, right?
I
Do you feel
couldn't
like
agree more.
there's a hole there in a way?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, we need a better marketing department.
Yeah.
But and no, I think you're right. Like to be honest, like the tech tip stuff on Instagram, while I do participate in it some because people love that stuff, it does a disservice to the whole industry. It really it focuses on the techniques or the tools that are fun and sexy and like concrete, but man, they're just means to an end. Like the making good decisions about what to do when and where to go is what it's all about. And so it really does, in my opinion, dub it down quite a bit, and does a disservice to really what the job is, in my opinion.
How do you feel like we could better how do you feel like the association could better represent themselves? Like, is there like a film that needs to be made, or like is do you guys need to be more content creators while also being guides, while guiding people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I feel like it's the same question that every small business or entrepreneur has to or solopreneur has to deal with is like, okay, the first step is to get really good at your craft. And then you gotta get really good telling people that you're really good at your craft, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's some disconnect there. And I think, I mean, it's obviously throwing a bunch of money at something often yields good results in any kind of context. But it's just an industry where we don't, nobody makes a lot of money. There's not a lot of margin for profit. And a lot of it goes back into investing in a better product for all of us. So, um, you can't fault anyone for doing that. And boy, it would be really helpful if we had a really, more nuanced and I don't know, professional and advanced PR.
Interesting. What about like the opinion that you have about recreational climbers or climbing influencers sharing their safety systems on social media? Do you feel like that, obviously it's free country, people can do whatever they want, but do you feel like that is a net positive or negative for the community? And do you feel like that information should be reserved for guides?
Oh, I think it's net positive for sure. I mean, the amount of information and real data, it may not be like a great sample size sometimes of data or testing, but the amount of data that's out there now is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, I learn new things all the time about certain systems or tests that were done, and 25 years ago, we didn't have any of that. Like a one-page paper would come out that someone pulled some things so they broke, and we're like, "Oh man, that is so cool." And like that stuff happens all the time now. So I think it's net positive for sure. And at the same time, kind of like I was saying a minute ago, I think is sometimes the techniques and tools are just an absolute red herring. Like it's just like it's like you know squirrel. It's like, oh yeah, cool, like another sexy tool that'll solve the
Yeah.
problem. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I love tools. Like I love technology, um, and even the techniques are a step in the right direction. But um, that's not what it's about. It's about the judgment piece for me. And so I did a training webinar. I've done it a couple times now. It's on my YouTube channel, or I introduced this framework I call the URMAP framework, URMAP, and it's let's see, it's a universal rubric for mountain adventure progression. It's super dorky, but it says it spells URMAP like it's your map.
Nice.
Um, and I think despite the acronym, however you feel about the acronym, the content there is really good. Where it basically starts from, in my view, like a much more 30,000 foot view, and it has 5 layers, and the pinnacle of this is like the last thing you choose is the tools. And if you work down from that, it goes tools. Well, from the base, it goes team, terrain, timing, techniques, and tools. And so you're working up from like thinking about where your team, who's on your team, where you're going to go, when you'll go there. And then from there, developing, okay, which techniques do I need to understand and know how to do? And from the techniques, I work into the tools that I'll actually bring, right? Like what's in my backpack. So what's in my backpack is like the last thing I think about planning any kind of adventure. And the techniques I'm going to use and need to develop to go have the adventure are the second to last thing I think about. Meanwhile, the whole base of this pyramid the timing of when to be there, both in a macro sense and a micro sense, the terrain I'm going to be in, that I want to actually be in and is appropriate, and the team I'm with is much more important in the grand scheme of things, I think. If you blow those bottom layers about who you're with or where you go or when you go there, it doesn't matter like what you know or what you bring in your backpack. It's just not going to work, right? So, yeah, there's a whole like whatever hour to 2 hour webinar that I've done talking about that concept in that format, and I think it's pretty useful. Yeah, the social media thing is it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's interesting. Everybody's very opinionated,
Yes.
and the way one person does it is the right way, and then everything else is going to kill people.
Totally.
It's a very polarizing space.
Well, and that's the thing, like, right? It's like it's always black or white, do this or do that, and the reality is like there's no context for what we're showing here. It's like, yes, this technique can absolutely work, maybe 2% of the time when these factors or these parameters are met. But let's be honest, like that's like if I pull out my tool bag, my toolbox, that's like the T27 Torx bit that I'm going to use once a year. It's not like the flathead screwdriver or the number 2 Phillips, right? That I use every single day,
Yeah.
all the time, day after day. So, yeah, the social media piece about like what we're all focused on and how much attention that deserves is totally skewed. It's kind of amazing to me, at least.
Yeah. What about the thought behind like constantly trying to improve our systems or to be at kind of like the pinnacle edge of what's best versus just using what works, and something that we're familiar with and something that's tried and true for us? Like, do you feel like there's kind of like a pitfall or a trap to constantly changing our systems and the effort to make them better versus just using what works?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I think a good place to start is like basically you should be able to solve, a particular problem in 2 ways. Like to start, let's just start by solving any problem with 2 different ways. And if you can do that, you're off to a good start. And so, we all have learned a way to do the things we do because of whoever taught us or whatever we saw. And patterns and habits are super helpful in some ways to shortcut, human heuristics, right? Like to shortcut the thought process about how to do something. But the reality is like nothing works all the time really well. So learn from good people is a really good place to start. And if you invest early on learning from people that are well-rounded and savvy and good teachers, then you'll be set up for life. So to me, it's less about the particulars about how someone might do something and more about why. Like I want people to have a few choices so they can choose the right tool for the right job. That's what we call application, right? Like use the right thing in the right place because you have a good reason for it. Like if you're just using the same thing in all the places all the time because that's the only thing well, you can do it that way. A lot of people lead their whole lives doing things that way. But to me, I think we can do better. And
you're also if you're varied enough in your experiences, you're going to find a situation where it doesn't work.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing is the best all the time.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, if you're able to have two systems for each problem, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of hybridizing that happens at a certain point where you've got this specific scenario that pulls, a lesson from here and a lesson from here and a lesson from here. And you're like, okay, oh, wow, I can link these all together and solve this problem in this kind of new way. And now you have this new skill set that you built.
Totally. And that's what I like. My whole theory about when I teach anything in climbing or otherwise is that I want people to understand the concepts of what they're trying to do,
yeah.
what they're trying to achieve. And, what problem we're trying to solve is really helpful a lot of times. Because then if you understand the concept, you can apply different tools in different ways and use different techniques to accomplish the same end result. And you can, over time, as you gain more experience, you start to see more nuance in situations, right? You see like that this stance is different, or this gear is that way or this way, or the rope line lies here today. And so as you start to see more nuance and understand more through your experience, you can start applying the concepts in a more advanced way. If you just learn how to do something one way and don't understand the why or the concepts behind it, of course you're going to do the same thing all the time because that's all you know. Like you just know that's what Silas said to do, so I'm going to do it that way. When the reality is like, boy, like you might not have your belay device, right? Or you might have a shorter rope, or you might have a core shot in your rope. And so conceptualizing, if you think about like layers or progression of learning something, conceptualizing is the second stage of 5. So the first being like memorization, where I cram for my exam and by next week it's gone, like not useful long term. Well, if I can conceptualize, that's the next step. So I see something, like for me, it'd be like I can see a car engine and I know conceptually how an internal combustion engine works. I get it, but I couldn't do the third stage, which is rebuilding a car engine and making it run. That's the application phase. And then what you're suggesting is like, okay, like I'm in the application phase of this particular skill, and I actually know it so well now that I actually could use this skill in a different way, like in a new way that I hadn't seen before. Like maybe I know how to back up my rappel with a prusik, and now I have to all of a sudden climb the rope, and I'm like, like what do I know that could grab the rope? Oh, a prusik, right? So you're generalizing that skill to a new scenario. And then the tip of the pyramid in this case would be creating a new way of doing something for you, like without input, right? So it may not be new to the industry, and this happens all the time. Like people come up with the same end result of a new way of doing something in parallel, kind of in tandem in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, as they get more experience and gain more expertise. So my whole goal is like, look, don't memorize what I'm telling you to do and the way I'm telling you to do it. That's a start. You have to mimic, of course, but really I want you to understand the next level, which is why are we doing this and what are the principles that I'm trying to convey? And then if we can do that over time, you'll be able to go to the third stage, which is applying it and applying it well, and then maybe generalizing and systemizing from there. So
I would say the conceptualizing phase is where a lot of the confidence comes into. Because like memorizing, sure, you're like, okay, this is what I was told to do, but you don't really know why, and so you're like, is it safe? You don't really know. You're just like, I saw this on Instagram, and finally when you get to that conceptualizing phase, you're able to understand why and how, and able to kind of sit in that confidence and eventually be able to apply it in different ways. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at with the gear piece, right? Is like why do I need pieces to be this certain size or this strength? So that's kind of my style. Is I try to explain as well as I understand it, which hopefully is right or right enough, in a way that conveys why we're trying to do something. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Yep.
Okay. I know, unfortunately we don't have a lot of time. There's one thing that I want to dive into.
We can keep rolling for a little while if you want.
Okay.
It's all good.
I guess I'm already here, so I'll cover this topic and see where it goes. I'm going to share why I love simul-gree wrapping.
Excellent.
And then I'd like you to tell me why I'm risking my life and my partner's life.
Oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I've never actually had like a real honest conversation about this. This is great.
Cool. So I was introduced to simul-gree wrapping last year. And I was nervous as hell because of the stigma about how dangerous it is. And I kind of was kind of a firm believer in just don't do it. Right. I met a person who I trust and I've climbed with before. And he, introduced me to it and I expressed concern. So we tethered to each other for the first time. And that was like enough, conceptualizing, managing the risk of like, okay, there's a balance of counterbalance. And if we're tethered, then okay, at least we can't go flying off the other ends. We'll tie knots and let's do it. And so we wrapped off Cloud Tower and did our first simul-gree wrap. And that was kind of my first experience for it. Went great. Then I kind of started to adopt it on my own. And I have a few select partners that I choose to do it with. One of them, his name is Bryce. And I feel like we've just gotten it down to such a science. And there's the one thing that I really, really love about simul-gree wrapping is the teamwork. I love the communication. I love that you're doing something together. Like there's that communication. It's like, okay, are we both connected? Boom, we clip our PS. We 1, 2, 3, take, weight the gree-grees. Okay, cool, we're system check. Take off the quick draw on the bolts, take off our PSs. 1, 2, 3, we wait, go over the edge, and it's like we work together. We get down to the bottom. 1, 2, 3, we clip our PS, double back the bolts, and then we're like 1, 2, 3, unweight the system. And so it's like this constant communication and teamwork and this like duality of experience that we're going through in this rappel. That I love, rather than it just being like, bye, okay, down. And then they're like, okay, hey, what's up? It's like, there's this teamwork aspect to it. And I know this is arguable, but I feel like it's way faster. I'll use like Rainbow Wall, for example. It's a 1,000-foot wall and we wrapped the entire thing in 30 minutes. And it's just like, I'm sure there's systems, and I'd love to hear, your advice on how to achieve such a fast rappel in a different way. But yeah, that's my experience with Simul Gree wrapping, and why I personally enjoy it so much is mostly the teamwork and the shared experience. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I ride street bikes. I'm a climber. I would say risk is kind of like something I'm comfortable in, and it's just a matter of like at least I feel like I understand the risks, and mitigating them properly is part of the fun.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
It's great.
The stage is yours.
I'm gonna start with some questions.
Okay.
So let's just take Rainbow Wall.
Okay.
I mean, so how steep is the terrain?
Super vertical.
Super vertical, right?
Not overhanging. Maybe like a few like overhanging things where you just like step over the edge.
Yep.
And then you're back on vertical terrain. But I would say vertical pretty much. Like
great. And what were all the anchors?
All 2 bolts.
Okay.
With
and
chains.
Were there any edges or like weird configuration of the terrain, or was it just like pretty much a planar wall?
Pretty planar. There was never any sort of edge that we put the rope over that I was ever concerned about.
Great. Cool. And it's pretty big. 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet.
Okay. So let's talk mechanics for a minute.
Okay.
So the things, I mean, look, big picture, is it an appropriate technique at times? Yes, it can be totally appropriate. So I don't have a problem with it used properly. But if I go back to what I was saying a minute ago, which is application is using the right technique at the right time, right? So there are times and situations where simul rappelling makes 0 sense and might even be a really, really bad choice. So I think Rainbow Wall is actually, if I were to think about, where I might actually think it was a good idea, that's one of the best ones I can think of as an example. Because, as you said, it's very steep. There aren't any sharp edges. You're pretty much fall line rappelling, right, on bolted anchors. And you're only going like 30 or 35 meters each rappel, right? And so the mechanics of it, you're putting twice as much force on the anchor, right? So if I'm using anchors anywhere that are not bolts, I'm asking why.
I've never simul gree wrapped on gear. I don't think I ever would do that.
Right? Or, so if you're alpine climbing, this is like the wrong choice. Mm. If you're adventure climbing, this is the wrong choice, right? So you have twice as much force on the anchors, and you have twice as much force on each strand. And so the way ropes often get core shot is with a tension rope over an edge, right? Rappelling. And so if you have twice as much force on each strand, it's much more likely you're going to get a core shot. So in my mind, it's kind of wild that we've moved to skinnier and skinnier and skinnier ropes, but we're putting twice as much force on than we ever have rappelling. So those are reasons that I don't think it's great mechanically. What I do like about it is that, well, the reasons I think that we do it more often now are a couple things. One, the common use of the gree-gree. Like everyone has gree-grees now. No one used to use gree-grees in multi-pitch climbing. Like 15 years ago, no one did that. So people are really comfortable and good. And this is part of what I'll get to in a minute. Like if we're better and more comfortable at doing something, we're going to tend to do that faster and more often. right? So if I'm a snowshoer and I'm learning to ski and I go to the top of the mountain and I take 2 turns on my skis and I fall down and I fall down and I fall down, I'm like, this is total bullshit. Like, I'm just gonna put my snowshoes back on. Like, of course, this is like awful. I'm just falling down the mountain. I can walk down this hill.
Yeah.
And it will probably be faster to walk down the mountain with my snowshoes the first time. Now, the 100th day I go skiing, skis are clearly the choice, right? They can be way faster because I'm better at it. And so we just have to realize that we get really fast and good and figure out the nuances and intricacies of the systems we use a lot, right? So everyone knows how to take a gree off their harness, open it, take the rope out, and load it back on their harness, right? Like, that's just like so fluid and natural. It's wicked fast, right? And if you compare it to using an ATC to rappel with, well, if you haven't done that before, it's just not going to be as fast. So that's part of the speed conversation for me. So everyone's got a gree. Everyone's used to belaying with a gree. Rappelling the gree is like the next logical step. And so they're pretty fast at it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with rappelling something like rainbow wall. The system should be closed either way. But I do think we should be aware that we're putting twice as much force on the anchors, and we're putting twice as much force on each strand, and that there are times that that's just inappropriate, right?
And I think that the biggest thing is the fact that it's both people at risk instead of one.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. So, and the more commonplace use of closing the rope system with knots in the end has made this a more a safer endeavor than it used to be. Clipping together with a tether of some kind is a good move. There's certain terrain that just wouldn't work very well, right? Sometimes it's like a pretty fine, like one single rappel line. So you can clipping together is a pretty good idea. You can also use a blocking knot, like a Reepschneer style rappel, so that at least one person is set up with a blocking knot.
Usually the heavier person.
Yep, could be for sure. And then so if I look at the time savings, I think that when people say, "Oh man, it's really fast," I think that all those things combine to make it faster. They're really fast with the setup because I've done it a bunch, and just the mechanics of a gree. Now, where I think you lose time is the fact that you oftentimes, especially if you're in the wrong type of terrain for it, you actually have to rappel a little bit slower, right? Because you're just like, you're conscious of your partner also waiting the rope. So if I got to stand up where it's not very planar terrain in a very straight fall line that's steep, it's going to be more awkward. Like if I have to stand up, if I have to do a long rappel and manage more rope on ledges, like that's just not a good setup. Where if I'm unweighting, we both have to unweight together every 20 to 50 feet and manage rope and throw rope and lean back at the same time. Like that just makes zero sense. You definitely won't save time there. So that, and then if we look at the whole equation in general, like the overall time management equation of descending, say the rainbow wall again, I think if we put a stopwatch, like a chess timer, like a stopwatch on the pieces of the equation where you're actually literally sliding down the rope relative to the transition at each anchor, I think that we would be surprised at how that time management works out.
I'd be interested. I think it'd be a really cool test to do.
Yeah.
You just use rainbow wall as an example. It would be really cool to find someone like yourself, just like super proficient with a 2-man rappelling team, and
totally.
Then do the same thing with the simul gree wrap and see exactly what's faster. I would think that would be hilarious. It would be a great YouTube video.
so I just think it's like, it's just a technique, and I just don't think it's the foundational technique that it's kind of become.
Gotcha.
Like I think the first technique that everyone should learn is how to make a retrievable rappel with a plaquette, with a tube style plate device, right?
I would agree. I would say it's more of an advanced technique, and you need to like you said, some people are going up these routes without an ATC, and I don't agree with that. Like I'm carrying both devices, and honestly, I don't like top belaying with a gree. I hate the sag in the system. I want to be able to go hands free, and so I use a tube style device because I love the locking mechanism of it. And if for some reason we can't simul gree wrap, I want to be able to use the tube style device with the with the Prusik and have that resort to kind of go back to if I need to.
For sure. And I mean, the next part of it is like, well, if something happens to somebody and someone gets injured or is unreliable, unconscious or unreliable, like that simul rappel technique is not going to work. Right. So a tandem rappel is much more appropriate and will work really well, which is one tube style device, regular belay plate with two people hanging off a spider, like two different tethers to the same device. And then you still have two people on two strands of rope, but it's similar weight to what you would have with the simul setup in terms of the anchor and on each strand, versus if I do the Reepschneer style where I block a knot and I'm doing a tandem rappel with a gree on one strand. Now I'm quadrupling the weight on that one strand versus a regular rappel, which is really asking to get your rope core shot. So I think in terms of like, if things go sideways, having an ATC style device and being able to tandem rappel is much more appropriate and useful.
Do you have personal or anecdotal experience of ropes being cut during rappel?
Yeah, for sure.
In these particular situations?
Yep, a few times for sure. Yep.
Yourself or like a partner or?
Yep. Yeah, myself. I mean, not getting cut in half, but core shotting.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure.
How did you find out? Like after you pulled the rope or?
Yeah, usually you pull it down and you're like, oh, great.
Holy shit. Wow. Yeah. And it's kind of like, what do you, it goes like an error in judgment and where you place the rope as you rappel down, or just kind of like what was your analysis of that?
It can be like a client falling off the fall line, like not being as delicate getting into the fall line with a sharp edge around. It can be, a poorly positioned anchor that just has an edge that's just not great. It can be a pinch of rock that kind of necks down into like a V groove that the rope gets sucked down into. I had somebody come through that was soloing one time ice climbing and decided to put their rope on top of my rope in the rapid link and then rappel down to the same ledge I was on and proceed to pull their rope over my rope and almost burn it in half.
Whoa.
We were anchored at that point on the next ledge below, but I mean, ropes do get core shot and do get nicked and cut. They don't usually break, but they can get cut.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Because we always talk about climbing, we talk about redundancy, and I'd say I've had some comments on Instagram from European climbers. They're like, "Where's your other rope? Like where's the other rope? Why do so many climbers climb with single ropes?" And we, it's so funny. We talk about redundancy and we'll scream at somebody for not clipping two bolts for a rappel or whatever the situation of redundancy is. But when we all climb with single ropes and we use them as tethers, and it's no one bats an eye. Like, do you see sort of kind of a hypocrisy there, or like, are you an advocate for twin rope systems? Like, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the rope systems have the right application, the right time and place to use them, whether it be twin, half, or single. And the choices of ropes we have now is pretty astounding. And then the desire to have a skinnier, lighter rope all the time is really kind of amazing. And so, I've heard certainly of ropes, more ropes getting cut in the last 5 years than I had my whole career, probably combined. So I think, being mindful about using either heavier ropes, thicker sheathed ropes, if they're single ropes, or using two ropes can be a really great solution. Probably underrated a lot of times. Yeah, for sure.
What would you say the thinnest rope you'd be comfortable with in most scenarios for climbing a single system?
Oh, I think it really depends on the terrain. I mean, if I'm guiding in the Alps, a lot of like mountaineering sort of stuff where I'm not doing as much rock climbing on sharp edges, but I'm doing more alpine climbing where falls are less common. I'm using like an 8.5 Opera Unicore, which is a special blend where the core is woven somehow to the sheath. It's my understanding. More cut resistant. In the gunks at home here, I'm using like a 9.5, which is not skinny by any means. When I went to Patagonia a few years ago, I'm using a fatter like 9.4 kind of rope versus a really skinny single. Ice climbing, I usually use like the skinniest ropes that I probably have, whether it be like in a half twin scenario or a triple rated single rope, because there's just less abrasion of edges in general. Although there are obviously like tools and crampons that are sharp.
Yeah, for sure.
And clipping around a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so I think it's just being really careful about, you know, everybody wants to go lighter and lighter and lighter all the time. And I do too, for sure. But there's a limit to what's, you know, useful and practical, to be honest. Yeah.
that makes sense. Set and setting is huge. You got and it's like you said, there's so many options, so many different tools, and it's all on us to be able to once again have the what's the conceptual knowledge to understand when to use these tools in certain situations.
Absolutely.
Instead of just being like, I love my 8.5, I use it for everything.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, it's a privilege to be able to have a quiver of ropes. I totally understand that. Not everyone wants to or can, but I kind of view it like, well, if I have 2 or 3 ropes that are in rotation for using the best tool for the job that year or two, probably overall my use will come out in the wash. Like if I have just 1 rope that I wear out every 6 months, right? Versus 3 ropes, which I wear out every 2 years. The use, the same number of days, but better, more precise tool for the day is a win for me usually.
Nice. All right, cool. I've got just a few closing questions, if that's cool with you.
Sure, of course.
So we learn a lot of lessons in climbing, whether that be from mentors, from guides, books, YouTube, Instagram. In your experience, in your, 24 years of climbing now?
Yeah, I guess so.
What lessons in climbing require context and decades of experience that you cannot learn in any other way?
Oh. Well, the one that comes to mind first is like just how much risk we're all taking. I mean, you just can't overemphasize the impact of something going really wrong. Like you just can't explain that. And I feel like that's a big part of my job when I'm with clients in the field, for sure, is like, well, I want to do this thing. And I'm like, look, I'm going to tell you this and you're not really going to fully understand it, but that's really dangerous for these reasons, right? Like climbing Mont Blanc means most likely we have to either cross the Grand Couloir or we have to cross underneath the hanging fire on the Takul. And those are just objective hazards that we can't manage. Like we can try to go at the right time, but there's a chance we just are going to taken out by huge objective hazard. And so we can have that conversation and be like, yeah, I get it. But until it happens, how can we possibly really truly understand what taking that risk means if it goes bad, right? We all have this bias where unless it goes bad, we think we're doing a fine job, and it's worth the risk if things go well enough, of course. But man, it's not probably worth it if it doesn't go well. So it's like this total, I don't know, like just lack of really truly understanding the consequences of our actions, that I think it's impossible to know.
That was something I spoke to Paul Ramsden about. I asked him a similar question of like, kind of what you're talking about, like how do we try to share this knowledge of how the real visceral impacts of these dangers that we witness firsthand? How do you try to convey that to somebody who hasn't gone through the same thing? And you can't. I think that's just the general understanding, is that you can warn someone as much as you want. You can tell them how risky it is, but until someone has actually gone through something and obviously survived the lesson, there's really no other way to really feel the gravity of the realities of these dangers.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have a particular experience or a particular situation that kind of like really brought the severity and the realities of risks in climbing to the forefront of your mind?
I mean, at this point for me, I've had a lot of friends get killed, and injured too. But the first one that comes to mind is my I would say my first mentor, John Tierney, in Maine, who's now an IFMGA mountain guide, who at this point was going to take his ski mountaineering guide exam in Valdez, Alaska. And I think I had known him probably at that point for maybe a year or two, and just learning to climb, learning that I probably wanted to guide at some point soon. And he was in Alaska training for the ski exam. And to make a very long story short, in a way on a training day, a cornice collapsed underneath his skis, and he fell probably 80 or so feet onto a flat, icy surface, and essentially, obliterated like L2, L3, and maybe L4. I don't remember the exact details. I don't know the spine anatomy super well, but destroyed his lower back, and almost didn't live through the experience. And eventually, with the help of his two partners, and partly skiing out, was able to get back to the road, and subsequently had a couple surgeries there, and was able to eventually get back home. Had a surgery a year or two later. Went back to pass his ski exam 2 or 3 years later. Super impressive. They said he'd never carry a backpack again. But I think what struck me about that was that, like, this was a guy to me who was the most thoughtful, conservative, knowledgeable person, and still to this day, like, probably is one of the top people in all those categories, in climbing. Like, right? Like, if, like, this wasn't a mistake that, well, I guess the point was that if this person could have something go wrong like this, it can happen to any of us. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how savvy you are. It can all go really bad. And every day we're each out there, you can have for me, it's a career ending or life changing or altering or ending mishap. So
How do you justify your existence in the mountains with that fact?
I don't know. It's really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
the things we do are life affirming. They make the rest of life more interesting, and going to work more manageable, and they're like the highlights of our lives a lot of times, right? So I mean, how can you? It's hard to think poorly upon that when you think of it that way. So I don't know.
Again, I think it's that personal decision of how much risk you're willing to take, how much objective hazard you're willing to put yourself under, how much like, I guess each objective has like a certain number of dice attached to it that you have to roll.
Sure.
And it's a matter of like how many dice are you willing to roll in any given moment. Yeah.
And over time too. I mean, I think about, like, I'm an internationally licensed mountain guide, and I live in New Paltz, New York, which is great rock cragging. Winter doesn't really exist here to the extent that I would like it to. The skiing is abysmal. There aren't any big mountains nearby, and I go back and forth between, like, I could totally live in Chamonix year round full time. I spend 3 months there a year, and it's kind of nice to come back and just go rock climbing, like cragging, pushing the grade, trad rock climbing here in the Gunks. Never more than 300 feet off the ground. So there's some kind of balance there for all of us that we got to figure out. But I do think that the one thing that helps that become more objective is the separation from the routine that you're in, whether it be a seasonal change or a move geographically, or just some time off from doing it every single day, is like the mental break, like we said in the debriefing kind of conversation of each day, is like just the mental break of like trying to look at it more objectively, and not just be like in the groove of doing the next biggest thing, the next hardest thing, like the next letter grade, always day after day after day after day. Because that's when it just becomes normal and mundane, and you just get really used to taking that risk, and it just seems normal.
Yeah, there's an element of complacency there that gets dangerous.
Yeah, I think just like comfort, like, yeah, it's just part of the deal.
Yeah. What did you say before? What's the quote? You said, if all of your climbing experiences are carefree and full of joy, then your red flag should be going off.
I'm a little dramatic sometimes. But yeah, I mean, it's all good until it's not. Like if it's just about thinking it's all good all the time, you're probably missing something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a healthy bit of anxiety. Just a
Yeah,
little bit. Just a
yeah,
little bit.
just a little realism, right? And I totally get, like, I'm probably like largely a pessimistic person. My wife is probably a more optimistic person.
Yeah.
There's riding that spectrum is something we all have to do, and probably the pessimism part is why I'm such a good guide.
Yeah.
Like, be careful out there.
I'd probably
But
say it keeps you, I'd say if as a climber in that specific context, I'd say the pessimist lives longer than the optimist.
I think so. But I don't climb 514 either.
Exactly. I was going to say that the optimist achieves more though, lives shorter, achieves more. Yeah. It just depends on what you're going for. Nice, man. Yeah, to kind of close this out, I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about the Ascend membership, the Ascend Pro membership, and really kind of bring this all circled back to this opportunity. I think one of the questions I had was, if we can't find a mentor, or we're struggling to find mentors, and we aren't really that psyched about trusting climbing influencers, gear beta and trad, mentorship online, where else can we turn? What else can we do? And how can we make ourselves safer as climbers? And it kind of seems like these programs that you've made are kind of filling that void, if I'm correct.
I mean, yeah, it's been really fun. It's been almost, I guess, 3.5 years or almost 4 years since I started the Ascend membership, and the idea was exactly what we're talking about. It's like, how can I offer to more people a level of mentorship that they need and want? And so the idea is it's a very, very low cost mentorship that's continuous and ongoing. This is a game that we are involved in for hopefully a very long time. So it's a way to have a lot of really great FaceTime with people from all over the world, that are trying to do things more safely, trying to do things better, try to push the grade for themselves in a way that's sustainable, try to open their horizons a little bit, and move into perhaps different terrain than they're already comfortable in. Um, and it's a community. It's been a pretty amazing community we've created inside of Ascend. People from literally all over the world, that are just trying to play this game well. I think do it safely enough, have a good time, not have our egos be the one driving the bus, not feeling like we're getting shamed from people on the internet. That we're just doing our thing and doing it well, and having fun with it. And it's been really great. We do monthly calls that are all recorded, live video calls that are all recorded. At this point, there's like 50 or so recorded calls in the membership. Everything from technical systems and rope work and transitions and rescue work, to mindset training and working on the lead head, or just kind of, trying to figure out how to deal with anxiety and be in the right headspace. And then we also deal with movement and the physical fitness, trying kind of training part of it, as well. And the basis of all of it is what we've been talking about with this conceptualization idea, right? Like, what is the why behind each of these things that we're trying to pursue? So that it's been really fun. I've had a bunch of amazing guests on that have given talks on certain specific topics that they're experts in, and just had great conversations across the board with lots of people. It's been great. Yeah. So the Ascend membership is for basically recreational climbers, of any skill set. And then the Ascend Pro is made for instructors and guides. And we have a group from all over the world again, from people just starting to guide or learn that they might want to guide, all the way to several IFMGA guides across the world as well. And that's been a really fun community too.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a blast. And you can look at it from a yearly perspective. You can sign up for a month, binge all the content and say, thanks, no thanks, it's not for me, or whatever you want.
Yeah,
So
from what I looked, it's pretty approachable. I think it's like $37 a month if you do it monthly.
I think it's 27.
27. And then it was like, yeah, like a discounted if you go for the whole year. But no, it's cool. I love the idea, and I definitely think it's something that's missing. I think that I have a lot of people come up to me and are struggling with mentors and wondering, how that process goes. And I think I'm going to be making an episode about partnership as well, and
Oh, cool.
people struggling to find partners and kind of what that looks like. But yeah, I think it's a really cool void to fill, and I think that the community will be better for it in the end. So,
I mean, it's been really fun. Like just meeting so many people that are interested to have the conversations we have has been amazing. And one of the offshoots has been that, like, I see people that met in the membership at the cliff. And they're like, yeah, we're doing this thing. I'm like, oh man, like, just makes my heart
that's cool.
feel a little bit, which is really nice. So,
how many people would you say are involved right now?
there's over 100 now.
Cool.
All said and done, which has been fantastic. It's been really, really fun.
Awesome. Where can people find you? Obviously you've got a growing Instagram channel. How can people, follow your story?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Silas Rossi, SILASROSSI, on social media and on YouTube. And then Alpine dash, like a hyphen, alpine-logic.com is my website. That's all my guiding booking is in there. You can find my email on there as well as some links to the membership, all that kind of thing too.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, we'll be sure to put the links in the description for anybody interested in checking out what you got going on.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions or talk to folks if they have anything they're looking to do or to pursue. I do also a fair bit of private coaching with people via Zoom remotely as well. So if the group thing is not quite your thing, that's also a possibility.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man, and I had a great time chatting with you. It was awesome.
Likewise, Kyle. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope it's useful for you and others.